All right, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Savvy Leaders having conversations about really important and impactful topics that are impacting your ability to be successful at work today, especially in today's modern environment where we're spending more time than ever online. So I think it's kind of funny that we're having a conversation about spending less time on the computer and in meetings in a live meeting. But hey, sometimes, right, we're not talking about getting rid of everything. What we're really talking about today is how can we just get better, right? How can we take the situation that we're in now, where we went to all meetings all the time? We know that's not working. We know there's a grind. We know that's causing stress. We know it's reducing productivity. As a matter of fact, I want to hit you with a quick stat from a really awesome article that I'll link in the comments and especially on the notes. But does anyone know how much productivity increases if you simply reduce your meetings by about a third to a fourth? So if you just cut out a fourth of your meetings every single week, any guesses from our expert panel today on the percentage that's been reported that productivity actually goes up?
I'll say 50%. I say it's more than the amount you cut.
We got a 50%. Anyone higher, lower? What do you think, Carrie, Pete?
A little 30.
30. All right.
I'll go Price is Right. I'll do $1.
Oh, he's going up 100%. All right. So we got a range in there. The number, according to Harvard Business Review in their article, Dear Managers, Stop Hosting So Many Meetings, 71%.
Really?
Wow.
Now, there is a point, I thought this was really interesting in the article too. There is a point at which not having meetings at all is actually counterproductive, but there's a sweet spot. And we've got Wendy on today, the leader of the fabulous company TechSmith. I don't know if you've ever used their products, Snagit or Camtasia, but we've got her today. She actually did this in real life with her entire company, no meetings for a month. So I'm going to turn it right over to her to start us off with there. What do you think about hearing this 71% based on your experience of not doing any meetings for a month? What happened to your productivity in that time frame?
Well, we did see a self-reported increase in productivity, which most of these flexible work environments are self-reported. So most employees already thought they were productive, to be clear, but about 15% of employees moved from saying they were productive to very productive. So we thought that was pretty significant to sharpen the saw that much.
Yep. Awesome. So I'm curious to hear from the rest of our panel, what's your own personal experience like in reducing meetings? Are you able to does anyone feel really comfortable saying to their boss, saying to a colleague, saying to their own team, hey, I don't want to come to this meeting today? What's that experience like for anyone on the panel? Maybe Pete or Carrie want to chime in on that for us.
Yeah, sure. I can comment. So we're fully remote, and ironically, we had a similar discussion around this a couple months ago. Some of our technical team was like, "Boy, we're meeting a lot," and so we actually did a kind of a discussion and said, "Well, listen, let's set some protocols that say, hey, I don't need to be in the meeting. I'm going to leave." We've tried to restructure it a little bit. It's worked quite well. So we've taken some meetings from an hour to 15 minutes. And it's been very well received. But I totally believe you have to have the leadership to support it and say, hey, listen, if it's not valuable, speak up and it's okay. I'm not sure everybody has that. So I haven't personally talked to a boss and said, hey, I don't feel like going to this for this reason. So I'm curious to kind of see the other thoughts or experiences on that regard. But
yeah, I got some research on that, but I'd love to hear some other comments, because this is kind of the crux of the whole issue, right? How comfortable, how easily can you actually share, I don't think we should be at this meeting and here's why? Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I will. So Pete, thanks for that perspective. One of the things that I have to say, I've never said to a boss, I'm not coming unless I had something else scheduled. But one of the approaches that I've taken that consistently moved the needle whenever I did it is, as a participant in the meeting, I would say, what are our next steps? So that when we come next time to the next meeting, we're not here revisiting a similar topic. And so even if I wasn't the facilitator of the meeting, I would somewhat plant seeds or try to drive the agenda so that we weren't spending as much time or having a repeated time. And there have been other instances where I'd say, do we actually need to meet next time if so and so is accomplishing X, I'm accomplishing Y, and the other person is accomplishing Z?
I love that. So maybe for you, it's not necessarily about saying, I'm not coming, but it's really putting some guideposts and having some good conversation around, should we, right? And arriving at a conclusion together. Awesome. Anybody else from the panel want to comment on how do you say no to meetings, especially if they're not yours?
Well, I mean, I agree with Pete that the meetings need to be about the people doing the work, not management. So management needs to give people the permission to say, this isn't worth my time. You know, we used to, when we were all in the office together, and now we mostly work remote, we had kind of a signal that you stand up in a meeting to signal, hey, I'm sort of thinking this isn't worth my time, I might leave. And we maybe haven't figured out quite how to replace that signal, but our message is, if the meeting isn't giving you value, leave. One thing we do that many organizations do is record all their meetings. So if it's just a question of getting the information, you're not needed to make a decision. We encourage working asynchronously and leaving and finishing the recording later.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. We do a lot of asynchronous work. Another tactic that has worked well for us is there's typically a few voices that dominate the meetings, right? So these are always your passionate people that are into it. And so for our daily stand-ups or for some meetings, we'll say, okay, we'll let other people go first. And then when they're done, they might say, okay, you're having a very technical discussion. I'm a designer. I'm going to bow out. And then the leader or the heavier personality can kind of go last. And we've found pretty nice success with that, managing the team. So everybody it's easier to say, okay, I'm done with my part. I don't really need the technical piece. I'm gonna bow out. But
I love that. I love the call out around stronger voices. So, you know, at the Disruptive Spark Academy, we do a lot of research around willingness. So why do some people speak up and others won't? And there's a pretty equal distribution in the bell curve around this. And it is pretty much true across sectors. And really, there's always a few dominant voices. And the rest of us are somewhere in the middle of, I'm not sure if I should speak up. And if I do speak up and I don't say the right thing, are there going to be repercussions from it? So we're constantly fighting against people's own internal resistance to being seen and heard. But when you, as the leader, provide the space, right, and let the voice that wouldn't normally speak up first have the floor, right? They're not as likely to ask for it. They also get a chance to shine, which is great. And other people get a chance to step out. Uh-oh, there goes my sign. When it's not your, you know, when you don't need to be there. So I think that's such a wonderful call out. I love that so much. Can I ask about
Susan, I just want to add. Yeah. I want to add to that point. You know, as an African American woman who's consistently worked in white spaces, that has always been an issue. Is, you know, as Pete mentioned, there's that singular voice that gets heard and is focused on, and it really the onus is really on the leader, because it's not simply the individual not feeling as if they have the opportunity to speak up, but is the opportunity being presented to them. So for those that are listening, I also encourage others who are in fact facilitating meetings to be in tune enough with the culture and the systems at play, and provide space for voices, no matter what the individual or who the individual is, but providing voices that don't traditionally get to be at the center of the conversation.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's so powerful, and it's prevalent, everywhere. That there, people just aren't, because they haven't traditionally been able to, because they're too afraid, because they have, like, listen, we do a lot of work with biohacking. You'd be surprised how much of chemical release actually contributes to your inability to speak up even when you want to. So making that space, making it inclusive, bringing in voices, and making space for that is, I think, one of the best strategies you can do to make a meeting even more effective, right? I think that's a phenomenal call out from that. Wendy, I think it was you that brought up this word, asynchronous. Can you tell me what that means?
Sure. There's a lot of discussion and clickbait headlines all about remote work and working from elsewhere, working from anywhere. According to the Slack Future Forum, the actual bigger productivity hack is actually allowing people to work when they want to work as opposed to where they want to work, although both are good, both are valuable. So there's actually considered a 29% self-reported productivity speak for providing flexibility on what time a day you work. And the way you do that is through asynchronous communication, meaning anytime communication. I leave a message, you get back to me when it's convenient for you. The biggest thing, like for me personally, I'm a mother of three, but had a high-powered career through that. It would have made such a difference for me, for instance, to be able to take a break right after school from work and attend to kids, and then catch up, in the evenings and respond. So part of the problem with synchronous meetings, not that they aren't valuable, is that they do really impede that time of day flexibility. You have to stop what you're doing. If you're coding, if you're in thought, you have to stop what you're doing and attend this meeting, which can, cause less productivity, especially if you were in a high productivity moment when you had to take that switching cost. But that's the idea. So we've gotten rid of all of our core hours as a corporate policy, and we allow teams to set their own working norms.
Now that is so interesting, because I can hear both sides of that going off in my head. So as a mother, actually, I left as the head of training for Ann Taylor University when my son was born, and that was back in 2008. And once I got a taste of being home, I really didn't want to go back. At that point, there was no flexibility, right? You either worked all day, or you didn't work in an office. That was pretty much, I think we can all, remember those days. I mean, it's still really relevant. That really hasn't gone away all that much. But I would apply for jobs and I would be like, but I just want to get my son off the bus at 3:00. Like, could I be home? And the answer was flat out no, over and over and over back then. And now, like, that's possible, which is the coolest thing about things that have happened. But I'm curious, what was it like for people, for like you as the leader of a company, to let go of this quote unquote control over when people were actually working in their times? Was that hard for you? Or did you have to get over any obstacles for that?
Well, we've always had a culture about empowering small, stable teams and kind of keeping them out of the way. So I would say the hardest thing I worried about as a leadership was actually more customer support and customer facing. If you have a customer problem, you're customer facing, you want to know that someone from engineering, the software development can be there and respond. So there were some things we had to kind of say, well, wait a minute, we need, there's some KPIs here. The teams can decide their own norms, but they're still going to have to be accountable to respond, in a certain amount of time to these things, or have enough people who are working during customer hours, things like that. Mm-hmm. But the actual other piece of it, honestly, I wish there was a better way to measure productivity versus performance. It's really hard in engineering. I'm sure Pete can attest to that. but I wish I had better data, but right now we're trusting the teams if they say it's working for them.
Yeah, we're fully asynchronous too. So I think we've touched on this. Wendy has for sure, and it really is about the culture and the leadership. I think it's more pressure on leadership when you're fully remote and asynchronous because you can't physically go look at somebody and talk to them face to face right away. So you have to build this culture where they want to contribute and be empowered. To Wendy's point, and so I always ask a lot of questions like, well, what do you think we should do? It's not my decision. And then over time, that kind of builds this stewardship, and then there's more ownership over it. And I've been in other cultures where it's not that way, and it's like, well, just do what I say, which is okay too. There's reasons for that. I'm not knocking it, but it definitely doesn't encourage the team to want to take this ownership if they know that they're going to be told what the right answer is, so to speak. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Pete. There's a lot of it has to do with the organization and from what stance those in leadership want to lead. Is it from it is my word or none, or is it a collective such as Wendy with saying, acknowledging the needs of the business? What is it that we can actually do to be supportive of all individuals?
Yeah, one thing that I do enjoy about a lot of things I enjoy about asynchronous and remote, but one thing that's nice is it almost forces better communication skills because I can't just talk to you and say, well, I didn't mean that. I meant this. You have to write it out, send it, and then they're going to read it. And so if you're off point and your communication is not, then you've just wasted your time, their time, and all the time in between. So that's something I've seen as a skill that's super valuable, but also unintended benefit, I think, for me.
Yeah. I love it. So I'm hearing some really good tips. I just want to recap them. One of the things that specifically I heard coming from Wendy is you just have to decide as a leader, I'm going to trust. I think that's a really great sign of your internal comfort level, right? Around trusting yourself. I have found that the more work I've done to trust myself in situations, the easier it is for me to trust others. Pete and I had a great conversation around this one time. We're like, how do we get more patience? And I said, the more patient I get with myself, the more patience I have to give to others. So I think a lot of this is, what are your own internal temperature settings around how easily is it for you to trust others, right? How patient can you be with people when they make mistakes, right? How willing are you to give people the benefit of the doubt? Carrie, to your point, is that woman in the room quiet because she doesn't know what to say, or because for so many years she hasn't been invited into the conversation? She doesn't even know she's allowed in it.
Yeah.
And what I have found is the second you start to give people permission, like if there's one thing I want everyone to take away with, when you give yourself permission to do it and you give other people permission to do it, what starts to happen for you becomes amazing. One of the pieces of research I wanted to share is, again, back to this Harvard Business Review article. They were like, what's the number one reason that people go to meetings even when they don't want to? Anybody want to guess? It's so crazy. Anybody want to guess? What's the number one reason? Even though it's not valuable for you, even though it'd actually be really good if you told your manager, because it's a blind spot, right? So it's important for them to learn. Even like all of those things, why do people still not do it? Anyone want to guess?
Obligation.
Obligation's part of it. Absolutely. Hey, Jeff, thanks for sharing. So obligation, any others? I don't know if I froze. Carrie, you're right on the money with it. It's guilt.
Oh, wow.
Guilt. It's pure, good, old-fashioned guilt, because we're in our heart of hearts good people. And when we are worried that we might be hurting someone else's feelings, we are more likely to sacrifice ourselves than we are to sacrifice them. So anyone out there who's been in a meeting, and honestly, I'm thinking about my 20 fear of missing out. Oh my goodness, great. I'm going to put that up there. That's right on the money too. My younger self sat in a meeting for years at a company that I worked at, and there was a whole group of us, and a manager said all the time, like a repeating word. And instead of any of us getting big enough and bold enough and strong enough internally to go to that manager and tell him what he was doing, we allowed him to like walk around saying this silly thing. And you know what? We never listened to anything he had to say. We were so fixated on, right? But none of us, like I'm calling myself out, I wasn't strong enough at that point in my life, or I didn't realize the power of me being so kind as to share something that somebody else needed to know. So red flags, right? I call them our blind spots. When you know, we're all managers here. A lot of you on the call are managers. Pete, I think you brought this up. Carrie, everyone has brought this up. How possible do you make it for your people to tell you where your blind spots are? And the second you start opening up those conversations, that's when asynchronous doesn't feel so hard. That's when feedback actually sounds really great, right? That's when the meetings we are having become super productive because I actually get to share my ideas and they're valued and they're heard. So any thoughts about that whole thing around the guilt? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Susan, I have to, as you were sharing that, one of the experiences that I've had as facilitating meetings, particularly with younger professionals and even some seasoned professionals, is I would call on people. Susan, what are your thoughts on X, Y, and Z? Pete, I get the sense that you have some reservations about what's being discussed. Can you elaborate? When you do that, I've consistently found that people are definitely encouraged to and empowered to share and contribute to the conversation. But more importantly, they recognize that they do have a voice and others recognize they have a voice. And it simply becomes part of the culture. And for me, an outcome of that is innovation, moving the needle on whatever the project is. And I have always found that people come back to me and say, Carrie, thank you so much for the opportunity over the years, or when I worked with or for you, in calling on me and giving me an opportunity to speak out. It was a way for me to grow and mature, or it got me thinking differently. So to your point, yes, the FOMO and the feeling of guilt, but when the facilitator of the meeting truly takes active ownership and recognizes that the meeting is not about them, that it's about the others and their ideas, is when the magic happens, in my opinion.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to like write this down and put it up on the screen. Take active ownership. I mean, can we hashtag this? I'm in love with that. Take active ownership. What was the other part of that? What was the other part of that, Carrie? Take active ownership, because the second part was even more impactful.
And allow the other voices to be heard.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I still remember when I first graduated college, I was in a meeting and I wanted to say something, and one leader said, "Hey, you know, Pete looks like he's been wanting to say something for a while. Why don't you say something?" And it always just stuck with me as such a nice thing, and I'll never forget that experience. And so that not just it pays a lot too. So I totally agree. Another point that I wanted to bring up is, and I've run into this a little bit too, where the leader will say, "Hey, I want feedback. Tell me what you think. Tell me your opinion." And then you bite, right? And you give the feedback. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait, they didn't really want feedback. That was not good. And then you very quickly learn that, okay, I'll just be quiet going forward because I got a frowny face or something behind the scenes happened. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So you have to really, it's really got to be honest, and you really have to be, this, to your point, a comforting space to encourage, because it's so hard to speak up, right? You want to make sure that they're not, tricked, so to speak. So, because that could backfire too.
Absolutely.
For me.
Yeah, and those little stories, right? They go on to have very big meaning in our lives. Like And I want to just point this out because Pete, I think it's such an amazing thing. Like something could happen to you. His frowny face might have nothing to do. I don't know in this situation, right? But if we interpret it that way, then we will automatically associate speaking up with not being safe for me. Right. And it is that basic. It is honestly like when we like big part of the Disruptive Spark Academy is helping people to understand why they're not taking the action they want to take on their goals. So we know all the time in training, right? I can tell everybody everything they need to know. But if I don't solve the hesitations and if I don't remove these like little moments that have happened in my life where I did that and it didn't work for me very well, I'm not going to take those actions. So part of like what I want people to really walk away with that is double check yourself, right? Did that frowny face, I was just having a conversation with someone on my team this morning. I got invited to speak at a meeting yesterday. I was supposed to speak for 30 minutes. Some of you know me a little bit better than others. I'm not good at speaking for 30 minutes. And I failed to do one really important thing. I failed to give somebody permission to cut me off because people are nice and they think it's rude. But honestly, what ended up happening is I went on for an hour, 15 minutes. And I was a guest in someone's meeting and it was not supposed to be that long. So while what I had to say was really important, because I didn't cut myself off and because I didn't give somebody else permission to cut me off, the overall general experience of it was greatly diminished. So like, I feel like it's such a great space. Like I'm probably never going to, I'm too much all the time. I've always been too much, but as I've gotten good at helping other people to help me manage my too muchness, I've been able to like be really comfortable in that space. So I love that you brought that up, Pete, because we all have, and honestly, anyone in the audience right now is probably thinking about a meeting that even in high school, even in elementary school, where you put yourself out there and it didn't go well. And we kind of created this narrative around, I can't do that anymore. And, checking perceptions is a great way to do that. We're kind of coming up on the end of our time together. We have a great question from someone who is hanging out with us right now. I want to see if I can get it on the screen. And if I can't, is it? I don't see it coming up. Okay. Nope, that's me. I don't want to do me. This is it. Because I want to see if we can give some quick tips. I want to do a real hot yes or no to answer a couple really burning questions, right? Human connection. This comes up a lot. So how are we building human connection if we're not actually meeting, whether virtually, right? Or actually face-to-face? Really quick around the table. What's your best way to manage this?
I would say incorporate it into any communications, like opening an email with, hey, I know it's graduation time, wishing you and your family all the best around transitioning to college or something like that.
Yep. Make time for small talk. If I could just say, we met for the first time, the four of us together 5 minutes ago. We spent time talking about colleges, where we lived, nothing really about the meeting. We were just building rapport and getting to know each other. I love that. Pete, how about you? Anything from you? Any quick suggestions on human connection?
Yeah, totally agree. Build the rapport. But, really try to listen to the person. When they say something, don't just think of what you're going to say, but listen to what they're saying. And people can tell if you are really listening or not. And it just pays off over and over again, because I've found a lot of people just aren't good listeners because it takes work, to actually listen and say, oh, that's interesting. Well, why did you go there? People love it. And it's a really great tactic. And the people I love working with all do that. And so I try to do it too.
I want to give you a really quick hack because there's a whole lot of reasons that people don't listen. A lot of them are anxiety produced. So if you have, if you are nervous, if you release the chemicals in your body that trigger nervousness, which happens a lot, especially if you are going to be the person speaking next, you will have, you can't do anything about that. It's not a character flaw, right? But Pete, whether you realize it or not, you gave us the antidote. You ready for it? You know what it is? The word interesting. The word interesting automatically stops the flow of that chemical and puts you back into the moment. So simply curiosity and interesting are two of the best what am I trying to say? Emotional levers you can use for yourself. Because the second you say, oh, that's interesting, your body can't help but literally lean in. And the second I'm leaning in, I'm engaged now in the conversation. It's like these little biohacks. I love to teach these little biohacks. Interesting is one of them. The other one is curiosity. Oh, how curious. Because what's the next word on top of curious? When you're curious about something, what do?
You want to know more.
I want to know more. Like you're tricking yourself into being able to actually be an active listener, even when things in your body are making it impossible for you to do so. How about Wendy? Last one for us on that topic. Anything you want to add?
Sure. Well, first I want to say that that's interesting because we tell people the same thing to avoid judgment. Like just try to be curious.
It works the same.
Yeah. Yep. Like try to turn on being curious. That's really great. Yeah, I was going to share, like when we were in the pandemic and everyone was experiencing Zoom fatigue, we implemented a practice that's still true, which is the first 5 minutes of every meeting is small talk. Back to that, make room for small talk. Or you don't have to participate. You can have that 5-minute meeting break. So it's optional because not everyone wants to turn that on when on demand and participate in that. The other thing just about the human element, we found that through our no meeting experiment, we wanted people when they were meeting synchronously to be more deliberate. So we saw about 3/4 of one-on-ones, like probably could be handled asynchronously, but there's still this well-being concern. So, people are supposed to check in on people and see them face to face. And so I think the other hack there is just to be deliberate about why you're having the meeting, particularly for one-on-ones. If that is the focus, make it the focus consciously.
Awesome. I love that too. So being more deliberate and checking in a little bit more on your people outside of meeting time. You don't have to wait for a meeting. Does anyone have a favorite? So I love two forms always of communication: email platform, and then a way to quickly get people. What are you using in your companies right now? What's your favorite? Anyone? Slack, Teams, Monday.com. Tell us your favorite. Anyone have a favorite? Carrie, what are you laughing? No,
I
don't.
I don't. It's the email, a call, or face to face in some capacity.
Okay, all right.
We are big with Slack. I've found it to be a great tool. There's always rules, right? So I would suggest setting time that you're away versus time you're there. You don't want the thing going off nonstop all the time, but it's been a great repository to connect quickly. So I'd say definitely Slack.
Yeah, we're a big Slack shop too. And I'll go so far to say email's kind of on its way out. Like people don't use email anymore unless it's external. It's where all the spam is. Like Slack is more, focused. But of course, I have to say we also use Snagit for video messaging. So instead of having that live meeting, you can record. You can be seen, record your face over your PowerPoint and the voiceover, and send it out even as a pre-read. So we have pretty heavy use of video every day too.
Yeah. And I know we haven't had a lot of time to talk about that, but I do think, that's a great conversation for another day. Having a product like Snagit, there are certainly other ones, but I have to say Snagit's one of my favorites. Lets you do this. Sometimes what you want to say doesn't come out right. And in a live meeting, you don't get a do-over. The reason I love recording is I can do over as much as I want. I'm a big believer in getting things out and on paper or on video, and then making 2 more changes. So I do a lot of recorded video. This is how Wendy and I met. I do all my client meetings with that. I don't hand over a single document that doesn't have my thoughts recorded and put in it and sent along with it. It saves on communication. It saves on confusion. Again, to Wendy's point earlier, I'm a consultant, so I need to work in your flow, not my flow. So if I, so I can send it to you, but it's up to you then when you get to receive it. I'm not putting parameters around how that takes place. And here's what I found just personally. Something that would take me 5 minutes to say the first time, but the third time I recorded it, I'm probably down to like 2 or 3 minutes. And one of the parameters that we actually put in place for people when they're sending that, whether it's an audio or a video, is it has to be 3 minutes or less. Wendy, I'm curious, did you put any parameters around that?
We have not put parameters around that, but I would say, yeah, it's rare that a video is more than 10 minutes and usually under 5. Yeah.
Right.
And if it's longer, you know what people are going to do. They're going to fast forward to listen to it, which is totally fine too.
They're not going to listen. So we have found actually that 2 to 3 is the sweet spot. Anything past that, people are actually out of patience. So if I use my rule of thumb, the first time you're going to do it, right? Do it 2 more times and you'll have your actual perfect version. So, but everything has to come out. So listen, I want to honor our time. We have a couple of questions still up here. What I think we'll do is sort of collect some of these on the back end and be able to respond to them. We are going to, the recording lives live on LinkedIn forever. So you're always welcome to find it. But what we're going to do is pull out the highlights. The team at the Disruptive Spark Academy, this is what they do really well. They're going to condense it down into really interesting tidbits, and we'll do a 1-pager implementation guide. So all the tools and strategies and everything you learned today, we'll package that all up. Anybody interested in that, make sure you're either following the Disruptive Spark Academy or any one of our guests here. We have Wendy, we have Carrie, we have Pete, and they're amazing companies. Get to know them and what they have to offer. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insight and being vulnerable with us about what's worked and not worked as when it comes to meetings. And I appreciate everybody who's been on the journey with us. Any last comments as we're wrapping up from anyone on the panel?
Oh, thanks. I really enjoyed it and appreciate it. Happy to do it again. It's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, happy less meetings. Remember to say no, it's a gift, right? Include people. I think those are some of the biggest takeaways, right? Make sure you give space for people that wouldn't on their own step up and see and be heard. And if you just get that far, right, you're going to already be crushing it in this space. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.
Hold on.
Hey there, if you're ready to empower your team to make decisions on their own and free up your valuable time to elevate the business, then you need to get a copy of my proven Disruptive Spark resource guide and learn techniques to ignite your team's performance. Simply go to disruptivespark.com, click on the Ignite Now button, and let's get you started today.